in the targeted countries to make joint progress in this regard. So today we will have a host of speakers. The first of them will be Mr. Colin Williams. He will present the document that I have to say I personally enjoyed reading this document. So buckle up, you're in for a very good ride towards integrated strategy for transition to formality, the roadmap for 4 countries covered by the project that he was working on. And I believe that you will get a very, very substantial insight into the phenomenon of informality and transition to formality. So as I said, buckle up. This is going to be interesting. Colin, I see you on the screen. It takes time to find everybody wherever everybody is. We have quite a number of participants, which is a good sign. So Colin, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Vlado. Let me share my screen. The most difficult task. Do tell me. Is that shared? Is that okay?
Yes, we see it.
Yes, yes.
All good.
Okay, right. So last year, I produced a report, as Vlado said, on an integrated strategy for the transition to formality. And what that report does is it highlights where attention is required in each of the 4 countries: Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. To summarize before I start, some countries are more advanced than others on some aspects of the transition to formality. No one country is more advanced on all aspects. So that provides a real opportunity for mutual learning between the countries, for the countries to learn from each other. What I want to do here then is to very briefly highlight the findings of the report, but please do read the report for the detailed policy recommendations. So, what is a strategic integrated approach? Well, the objective is to facilitate the transition to formality. And how is that achieved? Well, it's achieved, first of all, using a whole government approach to achieve this inclusive structural transformation. And it does that by joining up and coordinating the fields of labour law, tax law, and social security law, and fully involving the social partners. And to do that, it also uses the full range of policy measures available, which I will talk about. So the full range, both to enhance the power of authorities and to improve trust in authorities. So breaking down that definition, there are 3 components. First of all, the objective is not to reduce the informal economy, it's to formalise the informal economy. That's very important to remember. The second component is to develop this cross-government, whole-government coordinated approach. And the third component is to use the full range of policy tools and measures available. And let's go through each of those components in turn and also discuss the stage the countries are at. So first of all, formalising the informal economy. Recommendation 204 is very clear. It states the objective is to formalise the informal economy. It does not say the objective is to reduce it. It's to formalise the informal economy. Why does recommendation 204 say that? I will give you an example. 2/3 of all businesses globally start up or operate either partially or fully in the informal economy. And at least half of all enterprises globally operate unregistered. Now, if you were to eradicate the informal economy, what you would do is to destroy entrepreneurship and destroy enterprise culture, which we need to pursue economic development and growth. So it's an obvious reason why the aim is to formalize such enterprise, not eradicate it. In last year, we conducted a survey of the 4 countries. 3 of the countries responded, asking them about whether this is their objective in their strategies. And as you see, Azerbaijan said, yes, we fully adopt the objective of formalizing the informal economy. Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, both the Ministry of Labour and the social partners, said, we're taking steps to move in that direction. So obviously, the first recommendation is those countries need to ensure that that is their strategic objective when tackling the informal economy. What about the whole government approach? We've got these 4 sub-components: coordinating strategy across government, coordinating operations such as inspections across government, coordinating data collection, data analysis, data sharing across government, and fully involving the social partners. So let's take each in turn for what the survey results say. Well, on coordinating strategy, in Tajikistan, there is one single body responsible for the national strategy. In the other countries, different government ministries are responsible for different aspects. So tax administration for tax law, labour inspectorates for labour law, etc. So again, to move away from this fragmented approach, there's a need in some countries for this single national strategy within which the ministries then fit. Targets. There's one set of national targets for tackling the informal economy, which is common across the whole of government. That is the case in Tajikistan, but not so far the case in Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan. What about coordinating operations? The most common operation is inspections, and whether there are joined up inspections, joint inspections between, say, the tax administration and the labour inspectorate. Well, in Azerbaijan, they have moved in that direction, but it's only being discussed in the other countries. One way of achieving that is to set a target. So a country may say a certain percentage of all operations will be joint operations. Again, that is adopted in Azerbaijan, but it is only being discussed in the other countries. Before I move on to policy approaches, I will just talk very briefly about data collection, sharing and analysis, and the involvement of social partners. There is room for improvement in all of the countries surveyed, they say so, on both data collection, definitely on data sharing between ministries, and on data analysis. One of the key problems is data sharing. once it's collected, sharing between ministries, such as between the tax administration and the labour inspectorate. Social partner involvement, the summary would be there is room for improvement in all of the countries surveyed, and both the ministries accept that and the social partners. Okay, policy approaches. Well, traditionally, to tackle the informal economy, most authorities have focused on increasing the costs of operating in the informal economy. They've done that by increasing the penalties if you're caught, and by improving the probability of detection, such as by increasing inspections and increasing the efficiency of inspections, such as by developing databases. The issue is that if you want to transform informal work into formal work, then you also need to focus on improving the benefits of formality, not just the costs of operating in the informal economy. And there's been a shift in modern enforcement authorities towards seeking to improve the benefits of formality. But that assumes that anyone who acts, any actor in the informal economy, is a rational economic actor. But what we know through studies throughout the world is that they're not only rational economic actors who weigh up the costs and benefits of operating in the informal economy. They also operate for other reasons, and I've described those other reasons as they're social actors. They do not believe in the formal rules of the game, the legislation in the codes, because, for example, they perceive government, either politicians or public officials, as corrupt and putting tax money in their own pockets. So they do not see the point in operating in the formal economy. So for that reason, we need to both change the formal institutions and educate citizens, workers, employers about the benefits of formality. Let me go through each of these in turn and talk about the progress. So first of all, on the traditional approach of increasing the costs of informality through penalties and improving the risks of detection. Well, in the three countries responding, we see that penalties, most of the countries adopt a fair number of the different penalty systems you can adopt. But there is room for improvement still, such as using naming and shaming lists, non-compliance lists, etc. On increasing the risk of detection, most of the countries are well developed in terms of the policy initiatives they adopt. There are lots of ticks there and not many crosses. But there's still room for improvement on certain policy initiatives, such as mandatory identity cards, ensuring supply chain responsibility for the person at the top of the supply chain. But the benefits of formality, what about that? Are the countries pursuing the policy initiatives to improve the benefits of formality? Well, these are of two types. First of all, you can improve the benefits of formality for the employers and the workers, or you could improve the benefits of formality for the purchasers of goods and services from the informal economy. And what we see, and this replicates many other countries across the globe, is that a start has been made on what I call the supply side incentives. So incentives to make formality beneficial and easier for workers and employers, but there's less advance, less progress on the demand side measures to encourage purchasers to buy goods and services from the formal economy. So, and on the whole, these incentives to make formality more beneficial and easier being pursued mostly by the tax administrations and less by ministries of labour. And advanced authorities, modern authorities combine both these sticks and the carrots to increase the costs of informality and the benefits of formality. But if you stop there, you would be assuming that all participants in the informal economy are rational economic actors, and they're not, as I said. Many do not believe in what government is seeking to achieve, do not understand what government is seeking to achieve by formalising the informal economy. So the first thing you need to do is to change what I call the informal institutions. What I mean by that are citizens, workers and employers' norms, beliefs and values about the informal economy. And that does require education and awareness raising campaigns to inform people about the benefits of formality. But you will never persuade many of these citizens, workers and employers about the benefits of formality until there are actually changes in the formal institutions. So the formal rules of the game. And those are of two types. First of all, there are macro level economic and social conditions. A nice rule of thumb is that the policy initiatives pursued by enforcement authorities can perhaps tackle 1/3 of the causes of participation in the informal economy. But the other 2/3 needs to be tackled at the macro level, because it is due to, when you look at participation in the informal economy, it's higher when GDP per capita is lower. Participation in the informal economy is higher when there is poorer quality governance and there are higher levels of corruption. Participation in the informal economy is higher when tax revenue to GDP ratio is lower. It's higher when the expense of government as a percentage of GDP is lower. Informal economy is higher when inequality in a country is higher. So there are these macro level conditions we need to tackle the informal economy. But we also need to modernise our formal institutions so that people believe they are receiving fair treatment and there is distributive fairness in how governments act, that they receive something back for the taxes they pay and the social insurances they pay. And on this, the survey results show there's a lot of emphasis increasingly on education and awareness raising campaigns, but there is less recognition and pursuit of these or recognition that these macro level changes are also required, and that this modernization of formal institutions is also required. So, conclusions. I think it's been fantastic bringing these 4 countries together because they can learn a lot from each other. Some are more advanced than others on some issues, but not on others. So any discussion about the challenges they experienced when trying to adopt the objective of formalizing the informal economy is great. Any discussion between them of the problems and challenges they witnessed in pursuing a whole government approach and fully involving the social partners is very useful, and also a discussion between them of the challenges involved in adopting some of these policy measures, because countries you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Every country does not have to reinvent the wheel. They can learn from each other. And many countries have some very good tips about how to make progress on achieving this. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Colin. This was very inspiring. We have heard from you several very important messages. One of them, just to mention some of them, is the whole government approach, which we cannot simply repeat enough when we speak towards the representatives of the government, and there are quite many present with us here today. The goal is not to reduce the informal economy, but to formalize it. But I would just say that the key message to all colleagues listening to this is read the report, because I trust you will be inspired by reading this report. And this is not only important for those 4 countries targeted by the report, it is a source of inspiration for all the other countries that are facing the challenge of informal economy. So I would say that this is the key message. Please read the report. Anita has shared the documents in English and in Russian in the chat box. Please download it and read it when you have time. Do yourself a favor. With this, I would like to move to a next speaker. So we talked, and Colin touched upon this, that there is a role of the inspections to play, and for this the ILO has since very recently we have a new specialist on labor administration who will take on the role of the integrated approach, the role of inspections, the specialist of labor administration of ILO Moscow, Mr. Antonio Roballo dos Santos. I'm just looking at him somewhere in the screen. Antonio, if you hear me, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Gotcha. Thank you, Colin. Your presentation was fantastic. First of all, let me share my screen. Let's see. I hope that you are seeing my screen. First of all, I want to thank the organization for the opportunity to share some thoughts on this. Informality is not an easy phenomena to deal with. As you might see on the next slide, if in fact informality was all of it negative, well, would be focused on eliminating it, but that's not the objective, because there are 2 sides on the informality. Colin already mentioned it. There are positive aspects on the informality. You can see some of them on the screen. They are they constitute a buffer for social and economic downturns. They represent an activity that ensures the survival of millions of people. They are a reflection of creativity, talent, entrepreneurship, innovation, etc. But there is another side on this coin. And the other side of this coin is the social dumping that informality that stems from informality, the poverty, the unfair competition to the formalized economy, the decent work deficits that most of the informal workers experience, the precariousness of their employment relationships, the impact of the informality on the fiscal budget and on social security sustainability and the ability of the social protection to provide services and social protection to the citizens and to support the businesses. These are kind of two faces of a coin, and these faces of the coin poses a challenge to us, which is, as already was stressed by Colin and by Vlado, that put the essence not on eliminating the informal economy, but on ensuring its transition to formality. Because in eliminating the informal economy would imply not only eliminating more than half of the businesses, but also more than half of the jobs that they create. The idea really is to ensure a transition from the informal situation in which these businesses are carrying out their activities, and at the same time to increase the decent jobs that these businesses might create. And that is, but that is not easy to do. As you can see on the next slide, there are a lot of challenges when it comes to address informality and to ensure its transition to formality. On the previous presentation, Colin Williams presented some paths that may ensure that this transition is smoothly, and this transition that this transition is done not at the expense of the workers' rights and at the expense of the business's development. And that is the trick. Here is really the trick. The challenges are difficult because labor legislation in the generality of the countries is not applicable to the informal economy. And that is why it's so important to ensure that the national legislation are duly aligned with ILO recommendation 198 on the recognition of the employment relationship. That is very important because in the generality of the countries, the legal framework are usually ambiguous. And that is especially true in the times that we are living on, with the proliferation of non-standard forms of work through platforms, self-employment arrangements, bogus or legal, and of course that has also an impact on the lack of representation that these workers have. They don't have voice on their activity, and that is a huge challenge for employers' organization and especially for workers' organizations. Also, the challenges regarding the government in terms of ensuring a good governance of the labor market also create obstacles to tackle properly the informality and to ensure its transition to formality. And basically, as you know, it is very difficult to fight what we don't know. what we don't know. That's why these type of studies are so important. Of course, informality at different levels and with different natures happens all over the world. All over the world. The differences are on the size of the phenomenon and also on its specific nature. But as Colin pointed out, we don't have to invent the wheel again. We have to study the phenomena and to look at it, to look at the particulars of each country and share best practices and share knowledge and to analyze within which extension some practices of one country might be transposed and are applicable to other countries. That's why this study is so important and these conclusions are so important. And this webinar has the merit of putting at the same table representatives of 4 countries which were analyzed regarding the informality phenomena, and they can learn with each other. They can share best practices between them. So I congratulate the organizers of this webinar. So in face of these challenges, there are usually 2 types of policy responses to address informality. There is the one that is usually used in developing countries is the one that is focused on trying to ensure incremental improvements and assisting on formalization. There are other countries which has models that are mainly focused on addressing a specific case of informality, which is undeclared work. And they are focused, as Colin Williams already referred to, in a strategy which is based on the sticks and on the carrots. And it is common on developed countries, in particular on EU countries. And in this balance between carrots and sticks, I would say that in EU, the sticks, it means the deterrent measures, which are focused on improving the sanctions and improving the probability of detection, they are the ones that are preferred by the EU countries. But of course, within the world, we have different phenomena, we have different natures, different sizes. And again, we have to remember that informality is not necessarily in itself a bad thing if we can really transfer it to formality and ensure that people that are engaged there are becoming formal. So, because otherwise we will asphyxiate the economy and the social aspects of a country. So that is that's why in developing countries the approaches are more socially focused than probably tax oriented or social security oriented. And by the way, that is really what ILO recommendation 204 is all about. And the objective of this policy framework is really not to reduce, not to eliminate the informal economy, but to ensure its transition to formality. And the key words here are integration, because it does not call only upon labor inspection, for example. It calls on the Minister of Education. It calls on the employment services. It calls on the social security system. It has to be an integrated approach, because the roots of informality and the remedies to bring it to formality are wider than the scope of a tax or a social security issue. So they both have to have, as Colin already mentioned, an integrated strategy and an integrated program of addressing the phenomena. And this integrated strategy and policy framework should be focused on facilitating the transition of workers and businesses to the informal economy, from the informal economy to the formal economy, but also ensuring that during that process, the workers' rights are respected. Also, it is focused on promotion of the creation and preservation and sustainability of the jobs that are created, on the jobs that are created, and on the businesses that transit from the informality to the formality. Because the idea is not killing the businesses, is to give them conditions in which they can prosper in a formal way. And finally, to prevent that, due to the unfair competition that the formal businesses suffer from the informal ones, they don't go under, they don't become informal. So it is also important to ensure that the informalization of the formal economy doesn't happen. And this integrated policy framework is focused on a lot of aspects. The ones that I listed here are the most important, but there are others. First of all, it is important to ensure an appropriate legal framework that incentivizes businesses and workers to formalize their activities, and that disincentivates the informalization. In particular, there should be adopted mechanisms that ensure the existence of indicators which, when they are present, they allow to recognize the existence of an employment relationship. Also, there should be a combination of enabling compliance measures, preventive measures, corrective measures, measures to foster commitment, with deterrence measures that are focused on improving the enforcement, increasing the probability of detection, and improve the sanctions. Colin already talked about these measures. I will not do it now. I will refer you to the report that was already mentioned. Also, it is important to ensure the efficiency and effectiveness of the labor inspection system in order to promote the formalization in close cooperation with other public and private entities. It means, for example, to provide labor inspectors with adequate powers to discharge their duties, with a proper organization, systems, and resources. And also, their mandate should also cover workplaces in the informal economy, and should foresee coordination mechanisms with other relevant authorities, including on data sharing, which is very, very important to detect and to tackle the informal economy. Also, there should be public policies and programs on to promote entrepreneurship and the development of conducive business and investment environments. Also, there should be in place measures, policy measures, in order to facilitate the access of workers and business units to services, education services, training services, financial services, business services, access to new markets, to infrastructures, to technology, and also offices to support the formalization. Because in most cases, workers and business units don't know how to formalize their business. They just don't. So there should be services to help them to go that path. Also, there should be developed systems in order to ensure the extension of the social security coverage and to define social protection floors. Because otherwise, we will not succeed on taking out workers and business units from informality. And of course, labor inspection has a very important role to play on this integrated policy framework to ensure the transition from informal to formal economy. And this participatory labor inspection methodology for the informal economy is focused on two aspects. For one side, to assist the transition process, helping the business unit to register themselves in the tax office, in the social security, in the labor administration entities, and also to comply with their legal obligations. And on the other hand, to increase the protection of the workers before and during this transition, providing technical information, assistance to promote and engage in awareness raising campaigns, and of course to provide technical information and advice to employers and workers on how they should proceed in order to formalize their situations, and when the case may arise, to enforce the law and to apply the needed sanctions if needed be. This participatory labor inspection methodology for the informal economy is a pragmatic approach, and the main aspects are the ones that are shown here. First of all, the idea is not to change the labor market at one stroke. Is to ensure that there will be incremental improvements on the working conditions. First, by formalizing the business units, then by formalizing employment relationships, then implementing occupational safety and health management system. Then it's an incremental progress. Also, the promotion of the fundamental principles and rights at work. Also, provision of technical advice and information to employers and to workers to assist the formalization process and to ensure compliance, to increase the protection of workers' rights. And this approach is mainly focused on small and microeconomic units and self-employment and self-employed. But again, this represents 98% of the employers in the Europe, as we know. Most of them are small and micro, small, and micro units. And also, it is important that this participatory methodology, as well as the integration policy framework stemming from the ILO recommendation 204, is done in close consultation and with active participation of the actors of the informal economy, with the stakeholders. They have to be involved because they are the ones that more know about the phenomena, about their difficulties, about the reasons why they are engaged, and about which benefits will induce them to join the formal economy. So we have to work with them. And of course, there is a problem in the informal economy, which is the lack of representation by workers' organizations. But there are other alternatives, and there are associations and NGOs that represent the interests of parts of these informal economy actors. One of those is an NGO which is called StreetNet, which represents street vendors, and they are present in several countries. I remember South Africa, Ukraine, Moldova, I suppose. So there are actors that represent the interests of the ones that are engaged on the informal economy. So government, labor inspection, other government departments as education, vocational training, etc., have to engage on the discussions, on the definition of this strategy, as to engage these representatives of the informal economy. And thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to receive any questions from you, and I have to congratulate you for this opportunity, because really this webinar makes all the sense, and I hope that you will be able to really share the best practices that are shown there and that really advance to the next step, which is really implement them on the ground. Thank you so much. You have the floor, Vado. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antonio. It was very inspiring. Thank you for contributing to this event. And I think that if I can summarize in two main aspects what we have just seen in your presentation, first of all, the message would be it's not easy, because when we see the list of the challenges listed in one of your slides, yes, we are aware that this is not an easy task to implement. But the very next slide also can give us a hint how to approach this aspect. And I think it's slide number 5, where you just listed the number of areas that this touches upon, and it's the legal framework, it's the social protection, it's the skills, it's the employment, it's the enterprises enabling environment, it's the employers and workers organizations. So basically, this sums up of the whole of the ILO portfolio of activities, and this again sends us into the direction of integrated approach. Different departments in ILO have to cooperate to make these things possible. And this is also the message to the governments that different ministries need to work as much together as the different departments in ILO are working together to tackle this, because no ministry faced alone with this long list of challenges that we have seen will be able to do a significant progress. You need to work together, the whole government, the employers and workers organizations. Thank you so much. The next speaker in our agenda is another ILO Moscow colleague, Mr. Ramiro Pizarro. He will be sharing with you the recommendations from ILO Moscow country reports for Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Armenia for an enhanced coordination of employment and social protection policies. I'm just looking to see where.
Thanks, Gao. I am here.
There you are. Okay, you have the floor.
I know that we are now short of time, so I will be very brief. Just I would like to check with all the participants, and we have listened in the opening the report of the ILO Moscow project toward an integrated strategy for the transition to formality, roadmap for Azerbaijan, Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan, which was complemented from the perspective of the role played by the labor administration by my colleague Antonio Rovallo. I would like to stress that this South-South regional cooperation initiative promoting mutual learning and country-country cooperation on transition to formality was launched by the ILO Office for Eastern Europe and Central Asia based in Moscow City in the year 2020. No? But in addition to the main report, the ILO Moscow office has assisted partner countries on developing targeted national strategies on the transition from the informal to the formal economy. Good example, and we listen today, are the progress achieved by Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan. Uzbekistan has prioritized transition to formality as one out of 6 strategic objectives in the new employment strategy. Azerbaijan went through a formal process of discussion in a national tripartite committee for expanding the employment strategy for explicitly covering transition to formality. And as a result of this tripartite discussion, a national action plan was agreed, which is systematically monitored. That is the reason why we select these 2 country experience. But also workers and employers organizations.
Ramiro, just 1 second, just to inform the organizers, we are receiving the problems, the information about the problems with Russian translation. So just a second to check if this issue has been addressed.
Thanks, Lado. We have noted that we are on it. Give us a second.
Okay.
Да, слышно.
Okay, now
Yes,
everything
we
is
can hear
working. We can go on. Sorry, Ramiro,
So-
this is actually trying to make sure that you are being heard by everybody participating. Please go on.
Thanks, Bravo, for taking care, because I am describing the ILO Moscow office support to targeted national strategy for transition to formality. Yeah, I was talking that we select, that is the reason that we listen very soon, no? Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan as two good country case, because Uzbekistan introduced it for the transition to formality in the new employment strategy, and Azerbaijan is a very good case of tripartite discussion for agreeing on national action plan on the transition to formality, and Azerbaijan has the merit of keeping a continuum monitoring of this action plan. But also I would like to highlight that workers and employers organization selected different areas for peer-to-peer learning. For instance, how to use information technology and internet platform for monitoring and preventing undeclared work. And in your area, rather enterprise, how employer side, how to build an institutional environment and strengthen the business association to support the informal small and medium enterprise in their transition to formality. See, all these issues give a good evidence that transition to formality has been well placed here with high priority in the regional cooperation agenda in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, and government and employers and workers organizations are increasingly engaged in fighting informality and discussing together national strategies. I think our guide here is the ILO recommendation than 204 that recognize that tackling informality is a very complex and long-term task that require to address this root cause. And everyone in different countries, depending on the situation, imply for them to design and implement public employment policy for formalization that can be achieved through different complementary channels that match the three strategic objectives of the ILO recommendation for the transition to formality, which are these three channels, creating decent job and sustainable enterprise in the informal economy, facilitating the transition of workers and enterprise from the informal to the formal economy, and preventing the informalization of jobs. I think all these three areas have been very covered with the tools and instruments available for my colleagues. Now, I think it's time to listen how here different countries, employers and workers organizations are building their national strategies, which many of them often start by addressing a specific sector. For instance, was mentioned self-employment, or group of workers, or category of enterprise, or particular policy area, but also they intervene in several aspects of the driver of the informality. And even when they are focused on this specific group or target group, for formalization in most of the case address multi-dimension that affect or influence the informal work or the informal enterprise. So we will have the opportunity here to listen them. The strategy, for instance, for expanding legal coverage to those excluded or insufficiently covered, or a strategy for providing an adequate level of legal protection and inclusion on social insurance mechanism, or a strategy for ensuring an effective compliance with law and regulation. The country experience that you will listen now, including workers and employer organization initiative, are all, I can say now because I know them, are all responding to one or more of the strategic objectives mentioned above, and can be considered as a real building block for the national strategy for the transition from the informal to the formal economy. So I'm happy to have this opportunity to listen this national strategy by the actors themselves. Thanks, Vlado.
Thank you, Ramiro. Sorry for the short inconvenience of the short break. Luckily, it was quickly resolved. You already announced what is coming next, and thank you for this. Now we will hear. Unfortunately, we cannot cover all the countries, but we will hear some of the examples of the work being done in practice. And the first to have the floor, we will hear the representatives of the government of Uzbekistan. We will hear the head of the Department of Social Analysis in the Ministry of Employment, Ms. Adiba Nurudinova. Please, you have the floor.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues.
Я Нуридинова Адиба.
My name is Adiba Nuridinova. I am the head of the Department of Social Analysis and Statistics of International Ratings of Ministry of Labor of Uzbekistan. I would like to share with you the current status of our work, the challenges that we face in Uzbekistan. I don't think that our challenges are unique, and many of the speakers that we heard and that represented the international experience, that covered the analysis of the formalization of the informal economy, are similar. I think that our example of Uzbekistan is interesting as well, and if you have any questions, I will be ready to answer them. The current status of the labor market, Uzbekistan. The population is growing in the country, and more than 34 million of persons are now living in Uzbekistan. The labor resources are nearly 19 million persons. The workforce is 15 million, and 13 million and a half are the employed population. 500,000 are unemployed. Nearly 6 million dated by September, October 2021 are employed in formal economy, and nearly 6 million persons are employed in informal economy, and nearly 1.5 million are migrants. The disproportion that is present is evident. We see the difference in sectoral and in regional situation. There are there is a lot of informal economy in some regions that these days are more than the medium in the country. And as far as the sectors of economy are concerned, there is a lot of informal economy in construction industry, in light industry, in food industry, in agricultural productions. These disproportions and challenges, I think, are common also for other countries. But in Uzbekistan, nearly 500,000 of young people enter the labor market yearly. And so this disproportion is a big challenge. To tackle this issue and to go fast in this direction, we need the International Labour Organization's help, the involvement of international experts. And from 2017, we started together an active work in changing the employment policy in Uzbekistan. we proposed active programs for facilitating the employment, the public works, the subsidies, grants, the shares for employment were increased. We developed the system of microloans. You know that in our country, there are many migrant flows. That's why we organized the pre-departing activities. At the next slide, we can see the situation in the informal economy. To study the challenges and risks that are present there, the Ministry of Labor of Uzbekistan, together with the State Statistical Committee, organizes labor force studies, and we detected the low level of protection of informal workers. That's why we are working over the improvement of the legal framework. Recently, we adopted a new labor law, and that comprises the easier ways of employment, and we are going on with our work to facilitate the self-employed persons registration. During the lockdown in 2020, we adopted a new document that introduces a new facilitated procedure for the self-employed workers registration. We know that the informal economy has certain risks for the informal workers because they have a low and unstable income. Some work may be unstable, and during the pandemic and during the lockdown, we conducted a study of informal workers, and we saw a high rate of business closures. So the informal workers lost their jobs. This means an additional burden for the budget of the country, because during the pandemic in our country, special anti-crisis funds were created to support the population. And during this period, we understood that the formalization of the informal economy is an acute issue. Of course, we need the support of the International Labour Organization, and we developed a new strategy to facilitate the employment of the population by 2030. In Uzbekistan, much is done to develop not only the employment strategy, but also the social security strategy by 2030. We are working over a new law on social security. I am listing all these things because they are interlinked, and their aim is to provide employment for the population, to facilitate the formal employment, and to provide the social security for workers and for unemployed people. We think that it is highly important for the country to have a law dedicated to the social security. The next slide. shows the output that we have at the moment, the digitalization. In many countries, digitalization is used to facilitate the formalization of the informal economy. And in 2020, we launched a common labor system that works with nearly all the official data now. And now we are studying the way to make the informal sector employers be interested in formalizing his activity. So we are trying to find the incentives for the employers to formalize their business. That's why we created special digital platforms to facilitate this formalization of the informal enterprises. Thank you for your attention.
This is very valuable. It has been said a couple of times since the start of today's event how important it is to share the experience between the countries and that the countries of the sub-region and the countries participating to this event today can learn from each other. And I think that this greatly contributes in this direction. Also, our colleague Duncan has invited you in chat. You can follow the link to share your experiences in eCampus. There is a link. You can go there and upload your experiences. What I can add to this is just that it is equally important to share the experience of what works and what does not work, because then the other can, choose alternative path to solving the problem. So having heard one of the representatives of the ministry, now we move further down the line. The next to speak is the representative of the Ministry of Labor of Azerbaijan, Mr. Ismail Hassanzada from the Ministry of Labor of Azerbaijan, who will share the experiences of Azerbaijan. I cannot see the speaker on my.
К сожалению.
Mr. Hassanzada, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for ILO community creating such kind of opportunities that we share our ideas and knowledge to find sustainable way for formalizing informality. And today I'm going to present Azerbaijan government's action for preventing informality so far, and it continues actually. It's a framework for promoting the transition to formal employment. It's Azerbaijan experience actually. And the presentation covers negative effects of the informal employment on the country's economy and the social security of the employed population in Azerbaijan. People included risk group that are likely to work informal labor relation, and the rough size of the informal employment. And there's a commission on the regulation and the coordination of the labor relation is created in Azerbaijan for prevention of the informal employment, and action plan for prevention of informal employment in Azerbaijan Republic. And the implementation of the action plan for prevention of informal employment between 2017 and 2021, and the labor relation and employment subsystem, and the main priorities of the employment strategy 2019-2030 and the expected results. As we know that informal employment actually is a global problem, and one of the countries, many countries, especially developing countries, face such kind of challenges. In Azerbaijan, is also the same thing happening, but in different perspective. For example, as a country, Minister of Labor found that negative effects of informal employment on the country's economy and the social security of the employed population. Mostly as following. For example, it contradicts with fundamental principle of statehood, in particular with principle of equality and responsibility before the law. Informal employment in Azerbaijan mostly lead to artificial decrease in the labor productivity. Informal employment creates obliteration of workers' labor rights. And And subject of economic activity in Azerbaijan, where informal employment is represented, are largely out of the opportunities created by the state of the development of entrepreneurship, including access to capital of loans, and they cannot use judicial procedure. It's like gaps public policy and the legal system in Azerbaijan. And also tax evasion, one of the main challenges that negatively affects our society and our government. And the informal employment are mostly consist of, in Azerbaijan, uneducated people. So employers in this field are not interested in invested in human capital formation. This is our findings that is most lesson which negatively affect our government's subsequent public policy. So that as a result of this negative effectiveness, we found that we researched and found that people include in risk groups that are likely to work informal relation as a full living. For example, long-term employers, unskilled youths, migrants, people with disabilities, and unskilled employers, and other socially vulnerable groups. That group is as a most is observed by our research that existed in the informal economy. And in 2017, prevention of sex and informality in Azerbaijan, the Azerbaijan Republic in 2017 created as a commission, which is as a regulation and coordination of real direction. It's a job on the focus on preventing and finding informality in Azerbaijan. It's essentially, I can say essentially one of the important things that this commission is carried out by higher ranked officials. And that higher ranked officials make as effective a coordination where created as a civil working group for preventing informality in Azerbaijan. For example, first group of working group focus on most of legislation and administration, and the second group mostly focus on economic activity, and the third group of working group focusing on mostly investing cause of concealment of income generated as a result of informal employment. That CIS commission is created in 2017, mostly focus on city part of the city group to prevent informality in Azerbaijan. And as that is the process is carried to high-ranked official in Azerbaijan. And the preventing of informal employment in Azerbaijan, our government actually commission has approved the action plan, which is consists of a 36 paragraph and 5 sections. And each paragraph has its own procedures to prevent informality. For example, 13 of 36 mostly focus on improving legislation and normative legal acts. And 6 of 36 focus on improvement of administration. And the 6 of 36 focus on strengthening and of controlling measures in prevention of informal employment. And 6 of 36 mostly focus on building of monitoring and evaluation system. And 5 of 36 focus on arrangement of awareness raising and promotional work against informal employment. And as a result of this commission activity for 5 years, actually it continues, and many implementation of the action plan for prevention of employment between 2017 and 2021, several success has been done. For example, new law of the Republic of Azerbaijan on employment has been approved. And the first time in our legal system, informality added, which has created as a nature for us informal employment. And also law and employment insurance come into force. And in pursuance of the law, employment insurance fund, an employment insurance fund was established. And at the same time, the tax code is moderated, where the level of the sanction is increased for who involved informal employment. For example, it increased $1,200 US first time who involved informal employment. Second time it's increased $2,400 US, and the third time is 3,500, and the 3 or more time it continues as an increase. And also the Code of Administrative Offenses is amended, where the fine level of the fines for informality in Azerbaijan increased. For example, $1,000 US to $2,000 US, and etc. is continuous. And law of amendment to a Code of Administrative Offense of Republic of Azerbaijan were adopted for purpose of electronic compilation of protocol of decision in case of detection of administrative violation in fields of labor and employment through electronic information resources. Simultaneously, criminal code is amended where it creates criminal liability for informality, where who involved informality have a criminal liability behind the criminal code. At the same time, exploration of the opportunities to take into account working experience period as stimulating factor in granting mortgage credits and other social projects with a view of increasing interest of employers in informal employment, as well as the rules for calculating total monthly income of borrower on preferential mortgage loan. And this is also creates a benefit, easy access to benefits who have formal workers versus the informal. And meanwhile, during the period of the Commission activity between 2017 and 2021, there is a sort of 1% of increase in number of employees and contracts. This means that 31% of the employer have access to social insurances and they have labor contract as benefit provided by the government. Simultaneously, I can add one of the important success. Information technology is also one of the advantages of the and one of the priority of the using SML by the Commission. And throughout the 5 years as a term, labor relation and employment subsystem is designed, where function of the employment contract notification and the employment subsystem of the centralized electronic information system of Ministry of the Labor integrate to the new one, where it's created as a labor relation and employment subsystem according to the internal rules. It's a so-called informal employment control section. And the employment as a subsystem actually is created such systems that informal workers can easily access to resources that can make us into formality. For example, vacancies and self-employment projects and the other things we can adhere that and can easily access such kind of things that can provided by the labor relation as employment subsystem. And as we know that reaching such kind of target as the Azerbaijan government has designed employment strategy where it's covered 2019 and 2030. It says that it must focus on macroeconomic policy and the development of entrepreneurship and the impact of demographic trends on the labor market and employment policy, improving employment policy according to the new requirements of the economy, and improving the data collection, monitoring, forecast on the labor market, development of social responsibility and social partnership, integration of the social vulnerable groups in the labor market, and stringent labor standard and reducing informal relation. And design such condition new employment as a strategy for 2019 and 2030 is targeted reaching 80% of formal workers in our country. And this we expect that as a result of this actions taken by the government, a number of informal workers in our economy will be reduced, and it means that the economic resilience will be, and insurance stability in the labor market will be, protection of the workers' rights, and efficient implement of decent work opportunities, and the use of insurance premiums, increasing number of employers in the employee population, strengthening the institutional capacity of the labor market, social awareness for formal workers will be, and strengthening the relation between education system and labor market and social protection. And at the same time, the retirement reform is also designed for the Commission for until 2030 for preventing informality in Azerbaijan. That's all that the Azerbaijan government is designed for preventing informality. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As we have heard in one of the earlier presentations, Azerbaijan has some very advanced practices that other countries covered here can learn from and maybe even copy or just to get some inspiration from them. So I think that this is very valuable. And as we spoke before, the integrated approach is the key. And the integrated approach includes the participation of the workers and employers organizations. So now we are moving to, and we are the ILO, so the trade unions and the employers will always get the floor when ILO is organizer. And now we're moving to the experiences of the trade unions. We have Mr. Ivan Milich, the Russian Federation Trade Union, who will present the trade union side of the things. You have the floor.
Всем добрый день. Ну,
Good morning to everybody. My task is to speak and to illustrate the ways to work with the platform workers and with platform economy. Here it is important to underline that the dissemination of the platform employment and economy doesn't mean to reduce the informal part of the economy. It usually involves the increase of this part of economy. Maybe I will not go into details about the mechanisms that lay underneath. There is a special article in Russian, and I will put it in the chat box later. But the informal economy, due to the modern management technologies, as we witness in taxi service and delivery services, the informal economy is increasing there. Maybe sometimes we do not notice it because the platform employment uses the pseudo entrepreneurship or pseudo self-employment. And these platforms destroy the traditional employment that the organizations may have. That's why the level of guarantees of the workers is going down, the level of protection is going down, the right to strike, the right to free association is being diminished. These rights are guaranteed by the international legislation and by the ILO conventions. So what are we doing now with the platform employment? We are conducting a preparatory stage of to a more serious work. We are studying the types of platform employment, the types of platforms that exist, because they may seem easy at first sight, like Uber, like delivery services and other types of services, but the reality is different. Many platforms are interlinked. Now, one platform may produce and offer different services, the taxi service, the delivery, the food delivery service, and other types of goods. All these may be concentrated on one platform. There are a number of aspects to underline and that we detected and can list. Some platforms use freelance services. So, for example, if you need to do some work at home, maybe to repair some tube, you may ask a freelancer to do it, but it doesn't mean a stable income for this freelancer that works through the platform. There are other things when the platform sell through their facilities the different goods from different warehouses, and there is a mixed type of platform where we can trace the relations between the employer and the employee. These are the taxi services and delivery services platforms. Here, there are different possibilities to control the income of the payments of these workers to the people that work through this platform. You use a uniform and they have special cars, and the main incomes comes to the corporations like Uber, Globo, and others. These are the main indicators that can give us a possibility to say that many people, many workers that work through these platforms have their labor relations that are not recognized by the state. Other things that are happening now, if we look, if you Google some information or look at different sites, you see local conflicts between platform workers. These conflicts are mainly linked to payments and to labor guarantees. So the worker is being switched off, the platform is blocked, and his access to the platform is blocked, and his rights are not respected. He is not paid. There are many conflicts in taxi services that are of this kind. These are local conflicts. Sometimes the trade unions, neighbors take part in them. Sometimes people try to protect their rights by themselves. Sometimes they manage to achieve something, sometimes not. There are some local victories. In some cases, workers manage to receive special winter equipment. In other cases, the worker managed to achieve different working hours, but these are spot victories. The Confederation of Russian Trade Unions tries to monitor the situation. We are in contact with the Confederation of Labor of Russia, and we try to support such initiatives. As far as the future is concerned, it is important to understand that two more components are needed. The relations should be formalized, and there should be social security payments, tax payments. The workers should have their guarantees. But this movement from the bottom should increase, especially for these platform workers and for this kind of employment. For trade unions, it's important to change the judiciary procedures that are not optimal in Russia now. There are very few cases when some self-employed workers are recognized as real workers, and they are granted their rights. That's why this situation should be changed. We also study the possibility to have a bipartite regulation for such conflicts and cooperation with the employers. I'm speaking about the big players on this platform market. But we are trying to use the experience of our foreign colleagues that we learn as far as this aspect of bipartite regulation is concerned. And moreover, a more intensive development of such kind of employment will need a change in the legislation. The legislation should comprise additional aspects to provide protection and guarantees to such workers. If we look at the Russian Federation, many workers of such kind are concentrated in big cities in Russia, in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Yekaterinburg, and others. And many platform workers are labor migrants, mainly from the Central Asian countries. Many of them are from Kyrgyzstan because they have some less complicated procedures for to obtain the documents. And we perceive the necessity to move towards the ratification of the new ILO conventions, especially of the Convention on Protection of Immigrants and their families. There are many migrants, and we cannot ignore this fact. This is what I have to say in brief. Thank you.
I think this is a very valuable contribution. There are two things that I would just briefly like to stress out. First of all, how important it is, the view and the experience of the trade unions, because this is where the rubber meets the road. This is the shop floor experience, and it provides the information to the entire system, so that system could react to the things that you observe from the trade union, from the workers' angle. The other thing that you mentioned at the very end, it is also very important and actually emphasizes the importance of this regional approach, and this is this across-border impact. You mentioned migrant workers, and this is why it is important that now not only that we need to have integrated approach on national level, now the challenge has crossed the borders, and we have to coordinate the integrated approach between countries. So thank you so much for your contribution. Now we are coming to the contribution of the employer side. We will hear the representative of the GIA Association in Kyrgyzstan, the Employers Association. We will hear from Mr. Kaligul Saliev. Recently, GIA Association, that's the business association in Kyrgyzstan, has done quite significant efforts in addressing and tackling the issue of informal economy. I would say being involved in all this, this is the most advanced effort done by the employers organization in this sub-region. So this is why it is very important for the other employers organizations, but also the other participants to share the employers' views and employers' challenges in this regard. Mr. Saliev, you have the floor.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые участники.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I would like to brief to the point in order to not rob you of this precious time. I do not represent government structures or authorities of my country. I represent the business community. I am a legal counselor of our business association. We would like to share our opinion on how to tackle informal economy and how to contribute to the formalization of informal workers and companies. Everyone today has said that this is quite a topical issue, both in Kyrgyzstan and in other countries. And we have to go into research and study this problem in order to find the solutions. And we have developed a number of such solutions. Obviously, together with the ILO, we run specific researches and studies. The first one was dedicated to the study of institutional conditions which impact the development of small and medium-sized enterprises. We also run a statistic research based on 500 companies. We also surveyed employers in order to understand aspects related to the improvement of labor law. We have identified specific measures. According to the ILO, the level of informality in our country amounted to 52.5%, among which 54.2% were informal men workers, and 49.7% informality was among women. And the problem was not caused by the companies which have to survive, and that's why they still are in the informal sector. But what concerns us mostly are the companies that work informally in order to enjoy unwarranted benefits. The companies which are involved in this point, in this last approach, is growing, and mainly it depends on the unfair entrepreneurs. We have to engage in the reporting. The companies have to engage in the reporting, which means additional costs. And the companies may also operate in the informal sector because the legal system, the judicial system is not proactive, and this judicial system is overburdened, overloaded. There is corruption in the country, and there are no alternative conflict resolution or conflict settlement measures. There are some other points, such as some judicial decisions are not adequate, and they may not be, they are sometimes not feasible. Some judges are not independent, especially when they examine cases which regard payments to the government. And there are some barriers, such as some inspections are not justified, then the authorities abuse of their power, and the workers, those who work in the inspections, have very low wages. And employers also are not informed of their rights. We are now developing an electronic system of inspections, and we wanted to eliminate some problems in the government services. For example, education and health systems are very highly criticized because their services not correspond to the quality standards. And people do not trust these systems because they do not believe that against the taxes they will receive quality services. Taxpayers also have to know how the taxpayers' money is spent. This is important also to incentivize people to pay taxes. There are some issues related with the banks. We have to make loans more accessible. The informal workers or informal companies, enterprises are not attractive to the banks, and the banks do not provide loans to them because they trust them less. Now about social contributions and taxes. In our country, according to the survey among the employers, we found out that the amounts of contributions and taxes are really too high. This is one of the reasons for informality. If we decrease the social contributions and taxes, we could, and we did, as a matter of fact, decrease informality in the textile sector. In this sector, some contributions and taxes were decreased, and as a result, many textile companies formalized. Besides, in September this year, which means some 2 months ago, the president of our republic issued the law on decrease of the social contributions and taxes. And now we are drafting a specific law by which we will reduce these rates for all the employers, and we hope that this will contribute to formalization. We obviously have to improve the judicial system and simplify reporting. This is one of the recommendations provided by the ILO experts. We absolutely agree with this recommendation. I have already mentioned specific research, and we also run a third one. I would like to inform you on its outcomes. In Kyrgyzstan, we involved 65%, 65 people as respondents. 60% of them were male and 40% were female respondents. The age range was from 22 to 58. And according to the sphere of activity, 33% of them worked in the services sector, 27 in trade, 16 in industry, and 12 in agriculture. And small business was represented by very low figures. We work with the regions, and the informal economy is typical to the small and medium-sized enterprises. We asked about the share of workers which have signed a labor contract. Unfortunately, 32% replied that not a single worker had a labor contract. The 29% said that less than half of workers had labor contracts, and only 24% said that 100% of workers had employment contracts. And if all workers were regularly employed, this would increase contributions to the taxes, to the agencies, and social contributions would be increased. We asked about the reasons for not signing the employment contract. 43% replied that there was no necessity to respect this requirement. 37% said that they did not sign employment agreements in order to avoid paying taxes. 20% said that they did not know about this necessity, and 4.2% answered differently. We also asked whether the other types of agreements were signed with workers rather than signing the employment agreement or employment contract. Whether they signed agency agreements or subcontractor agreements. So 37% of the respondents said that they never signed such types of agreements, and 26% said that they always signed this type of agreements. And the causes to sign such agreements were the following. 45% said that these type of agreements are best for the employers and for workers. 27% said that they signed such agreements to avoid or to optimize taxes to be paid. 13% said that they did not know the difference between employment contracts and subcontractor contracts, for example. Now, with regard to the taxes on income, 36% believe that the amount of these taxes is very high, too high. 24% say that these are acceptable, and the same amount of respondents said that the amount of income tax is normal. 10.8% did not have any opinion on this point. There was another point regarding the contributions to social funds, such as pension fund, for example. 47% said that these contributions were too high. 19% was of the opinion that these were normal. The same some percent said, 14% said that the amount was normal. And there was another question regarding
way behind the agenda, so it would be good if we can speed up a little bit to give a bit time for maybe questions and answers. Thank you.
Да, спасибо большое, Владимир.
Thank you, Vladimir. As a matter of fact, I have said everything I wanted to say. So I hope that you understood what type of situation we have.
Actually, we have come to the end of the list of the speakers. We still have a bit of time for questions and answers. We have already a few questions in chat box. I found each presentation very interesting, so I felt sorry to interrupt anybody. This is why we were way behind the agenda, but I think that the speakers were very relevant, and it would be really a pity to cut anybody short. I have several questions. I've recorded that first questions arrived at 1:36 Moscow time. So there are more negative features than positive ones. How can we cope with the negative features in order to make a good transition to formality? I think that this was questions raised while Colin was presenting, so I guess that it was his part to answer. Just very briefly, and then we'll go to next question.
I think it was during Antonio, but I will answer. I would not say that they are positive features of informality. There are positive features of workers and enterprises operating in the informal economy if they are transferred into the formal economy. So I do not think that you can actually talk about positive features of the informal economy. They're only positive features if they're transformed into the formal economy. Antonio may disagree with me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
if I may, Well, the thing is that there is this two points of view, one of which sustains that informal economy might have a social function, which is to give work to whom in another outset would not even ever work. So in that sense, informal economy is really a positive feature because it's allow people to survive. And this thesis, I read them often in literature from authors from Latin America. We can find it elsewhere in the world. It's not a specific feature of Latin America. I don't want to be misunderstood. But the idea is that when you have to choose between have no job at all, or at least work informally, but you can sustain your family, you can get out of poverty, and especially in countries where there is no social protection system whatsoever, no minimum floors, nothing. Either you gain something to eat or you don't. So in this feature, informal economy has at least the merit of helping people out of poverty, to give them some sense of contribution to community, and that's why there is this sense of seeing, even when it comes to undergrad work, you see that people say that they use underclad workers because they are their friends, they are trying to help them. Otherwise, they will be out of job. That's why informality sometimes is seen as the least bad thing, you know, like a social mattress, and that is why it's so difficult.
If I can summarize, Antonio, if I can summarize this, we
cannot just eliminate it. The
positive side
units,
of informal economy is not the accent on informal, but on economy, that there is some economic activity that provides bread to those involved.
Exactly.
So this is the positive side. We have another question because we need to finalize quickly. So this is why I am sorry. I have the liberty to interrupt. We have another question, and we have to finish soon. We have another question directed directly to Mr. Milik from Trade Union. Which are the points of agreement on labor migration politics with employers, and what is the potential of social dialogue in this aspect? Mr. Milik, could you please quickly take on this one?
Но это есть возможность пока что договоренности.
The possibilities of agreement are in how can we react for the urgent situation, like in the German trade union. And now we are trying to implement the same thing in the Russian situation on the Russian digital platforms, and this is part of the program of the Confederation of Trade Unions. We are only at the beginning of this way. We are trying different things. The German trade union Verdi developed a scheme of agreement with different employers, different platforms, that creates a kind of mechanism of interaction in case of conflicts.
So we have come more or less to the end of the time allocated for this roundtable. So if you agree, I would not take any further questions. Otherwise, we would be going to quite into the red zone. I see Anita is raising her hand, so I give the floor to Anita.
Yes, no, I'm not sure. I think the problem is mostly the translators, because I see everybody is very passionately here. We have 66 participants. We were 75, so nobody really left the meeting, which means the interest is very high. I just imagine the problem would be the interpreters. I'm not sure. Sneha will have to tell us if we have.
To be fair, Anita, we had asked the interpreters to be for 2 hours. I'm sure we can count on their generosity for a few minutes, but beyond 10 minutes or so, I think it might be unfair and will not be part of the decent work principles that we turn to espouse.
Yeah, so just to finish my phrase, thanks, Neha. We have just a few minutes, which would mean we can maybe ask one more question and one more round of replies, but maybe ending in the next 5 minutes. I see Antonio is very excited and would like to speak. I just wanted to say one thing is that next, first of all, thank everybody, it was fantastic. And thanks, I'm saying Antonio, my compatriot in language, because according to Camões, our language is our patria, our nation. So this could also be a little bit seen for the Russian speakers. So you have somehow this commonalities. Thank Colin for the fantastic paper and analysis, because thanks to your paper and recommendations, we had lots of very good interventions. And thanks to your paper, we also worked on your paper in the past series that you could not attend. So we've been using your bright ideas for the past few rounds, including the Turing trainings. And Vlado was a brilliant moderator, because with this fantastic agenda with all the social partners from CIS and Russia, we managed to go so smoothly through the program. So I'm just going to end here, and then maybe Vlado, you decide if you want to give the floor to some other colleagues or not. I think Antonio wants to speak, but I will just put in the chat the quote homework for the next session, which is the continuation of the Google slides on the recommendations. By the way, Colin, some of them are stemming from your work and Mehotra's work. So over to you, Vlado.
Thank you, Anita. So basically, since I see no other hands raised, I will give floor to Antonio under one condition, that he is very brief.
Thank you, Vlado, and thank you, Anita. Just to address one of the questions on one of the issues that was raised by the Russian trade unions, I suppose that has to do with the recognition of situations of employment relationship in the cases, for example, of platform workers, bogus self-employed, etc. I will just share quickly a best practice in Portugal. One of the difficulties of this type of workers is that they are not unionized. And in some countries, they cannot be represented by trade unions, because until they are recognized as an employee, they cannot be represented by a trade union. Well, in Portugal, there was this problem. But and in Portugal, there is also the situation where self-employed are misused. So in Portugal, there is a common practice of misuse of service provision contracts in employment relationships. What happened is that these self-employed persons create an association to represent their interests, and they collected 200,000 of signatures or whatever, and they submit a law proposal to the parliament in order to amend the laws to foresee a specific procedure for the recognition of the employment relationship in cases of misuse of service contracts in case of employment relationships, and they get it done. It was approved. There was amendments to the labor code, to the Portuguese labor code, and also to the statute of labor inspection. Now, a labor inspector, when he sees that there is indicators that are foreseen on the labor code of the existence of an employment relationship between an employer and the workers, he has to notify the employer to put them on a permanent contract within 15 days. And if he does not do that, or if he contests it, labor inspection has to fill in a complaint with the public prosecutor's office, and the public prosecutor's office notify the employee to do the same. And if it doesn't, public prosecutor's office put an action on the court, and is an urgent proceeding. And by the way, there was some developments on this law, and now it is possible to do a common action of several workers that work for the same employer. And that is to address situations of a lot of workers that work for the same employer in the same conditions, like the platforms, for example, like the call centers, like the taxi drivers, etc. So think about it, because as we discussed on my presentation, one of the things that needs to be done is try to give voices to the workers and to the business units as the informal economy, and to better support them. Thank you so much. Thank you for the time, Vlado. So it was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Antonio. So with this, we have spent the list of speakers, the list of raised hands for questions, the list of answers. So we can safely say that, and we spent the time for which we have hired our interpreters. So we can safely say that we have come to the end of today's event. Anita has raised a hand, and good thing about this slide extension is that it enabled Anita to share the documents with you. So in chat box, you will see quite a number of links shared with you during today's event. So please go take a look at the documentation. There is a lot of very useful information and additional documentation shared with you, which complements this event. Anita, back to you.
No, actually, I had put a different icon, which was this applause icon, because I think we expired our time. But thanks. So that, of course, permits to give a few seconds for people, because once the Zoom session ends, they cannot copy the links, but they have it anyway, because we have sent it through email as well, and it's also in the eCampus. Anyway, thanks so much, Vlado, for your moderations. Thanks, Snehal, for the silent moderation and the interpreters. I don't know if you want to say something, Snehal.
No, that's it. Thanks to the interpreters. Thanks to Vlado and all the presenters. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
See you back on the 23rd of November. That's the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Excellent work. Thanks.